Hi, I'm Leanne Ely. I'm a nutritionist, a New York Times best-selling author, and some people even say I'm a life coach. I started the Daily Dish Show to share my story, my truth, and my journey to vibrancy, and to inspire others to do the same. Because it's all about grit, perseverance, and finding a way despite the odds. It's about embracing the whole woman, not just the parts that are easy to love, and feeding her heart, mind, body, and soul. But I found that this isn't just my story, it's your story too. It's go time. This is the Daily Dish. We're going to be building our house, and let's talk about this. One component that we haven't talked about this whole time is the patience one needs for building a house. You know, think about it. If your contractor said something went wrong or we got to change something, especially when you're in the middle of a remodel. And I don't know about you, but I like me a little HGTV. I like to see, well, let's take this wall down and now we're going to need a structural beam, you know? When you move things around and change things up, very often it's not just a matter of take it down and clean it up and boom, then we're done. No. You know what it usually means? It means that we need to take a look and make a decision on why do we want to take this wall down in the first place? Well, we want the additional light. We want the additional whatever. What does that mean that we need to do then? Is it just a matter of taking it down and cleaning it up, or do we have to do some kind of a modification in order to keep everything in place, right? I love that, Terry. Did you see what Terry said? She says, as I declutter, I will curate in the area left. Yes, see? And when we curate, we also get to decorate. Have you noticed that? We get to decorate. All of a sudden we have ideas that we didn't have before. But one thing that's really difficult, I think, for all of us, and one thing that I think that some of us maybe even struggle with, excuse me, I have a little bit of an itchy nose. One thing that I think that a lot of us struggle with is in this remodel, we just want it done. Does anybody at all remember me going, nyeh, 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 about the bathroom remodel that we went through? Because we got ourselves to the place of a lot of all the construction getting out, and every night I vacuumed, every night, because there was dust everywhere. And I had to make sure that, you know, we weren't tracking that in. And I didn't want to be sleeping with a bunch of, you know, drywall powder in my bed. You know, I didn't want all of that. So y'all remember that. Hi, Butterfly and Cheryl. So you know, it was a complete mess. It was a complete mess. But going forward and going through it, I had to develop a real sense of patience. I really had to develop a real sense of patience because it doesn't just happen like that. And this is how it is when we're building our own house that we want to live in, when we're doing whatever it is with our bodies, with our minds, with our soul, with all of it. There is a real shift that needs to happen, and there needs to be patience in there because, you know, and we talked about this when in Inner Circle today, sometimes we don't get it out the first pass. Sometimes it needs to be rethought of. And in the middle of a remodel, sometimes you're taking down a wall and you decide, I just don't have $10,000 extra to put that big structural beam in there and get an engineer in here and do all of that stuff. So what do? You reset. You think about it again. You have patience with the process. And I think a lot of times we dash our dreams against the rocks because we simply don't have enough patience with ourselves. That's what I want to talk about today. My dad used to always say, hold your horses, young lady. Did anybody ever have a dad who was always saying that? Because I was a little bit, I want to get this done. And I'm still that way. You know, when we moved into our house here in December, I had the house unpacked with stuff on the walls within 5 days. You know why? Because it was important to me to have an environment that supported the life that I wanted to live. And I realized too that I had so many boxes. Like I had my whole closet here in my office just absolutely stacked with boxes that I didn't even open till later. That told me something, that I really didn't need all of that stuff, or some of it needed to just be, and some of it I did, of course, right? Because there's laws. I've got to keep certain things. I have to archive certain things and keep them as a business owner. But it was interesting how, you just get in and you just make things happen. And then once you've lived in the house for a little bit, then it's time to think about the remodeling process. That's what we've been talking about, being your own contractor. But if we're going to be our own contractors, we have to look at having the capacity to accept and tolerate delay. If you've been through a build, then and there's always a delay. The tile didn't come in or something else didn't get in. But, we need to be able to do this without suffering and without having throwing little fits like 3-year-olds in the middle of Target because we're not getting a toy that we want. Patience with ourselves is pretty tough sometimes, though, because we want it now. We want it done. But, the fact is that impatience is a sign of immaturity. That hurt a little bit. It's true, though. Impatience is a sign of immaturity, and it's also a sign that we're not going to get all the way through it. We can be patient with certain parts of the process, and then maybe we should be impatient with certain parts of how we're doing this, like we're rationalizing or we're pushing back or it's not perfect yet. And that's one of the reasons why I'm not getting something done. I think we need to take a look at that. And we have to examine, do I have patience in the right things? And am I impatient for the right things as well? Because I think even though impatience gets such a bad rap, I think we need to be a little bit impatient with ourselves. For certain things, not all of them, but for certain things. If we're not getting off the dime, do you remember what our what was it? It was last week's thing, or the week before. I guess it was last week. An ounce of action is worth a ton of theory. If we're always theorizing and not doing, then we should be impatient with ourselves. We should be impatient. We can build our morning and evening rituals. We can do that. And, we talked about complication with that, but impatience with certain things that we should be doing. If our perfectionism is holding us back from actually doing something, then that's a place for impatience. Seriously. You just say, I have no time for that. That's an impatient thing to say. But when you're saying it about something in particular, I have no time for not figuring out what my morning ritual should be and doing it. How much time do I need? And start asking yourself the questions so that you can get on with it. But we have to put patience in the right place, and we have to put our impatience also in the right place. Being impatient with things not getting done because you should be getting them done. And I hate the word should, but I have no other word. If anybody can think of another one. That's kind of the fact that we need, those are the things that we need to look at. We also have to look at what our impatience is about as well. I'm not talking about good impatience where we're saying, you know what, get off the dime, Leanne. It's time to just get this thing done, get these things done. But it's also a matter of entitlement. I think sometimes we feel we're entitled to having everything done and everything in a certain way. And if it's not, then just boom, gone. It's over. What if your contractor did that to you? What if your contractor who's here building your house and says, yeah, this is what it's going to be. And you're saying, well, I want a couple of changes on those plans. And he looks at your plans and says, well, there you go. Takes your blueprint, hands it to you. I'm done. I'm not doing it. If you're not going to do it this way, I'm not going to do it at all. What if that happened? But that's what we do with ourselves, and we're the ultimate contractors for our lives. And yet we are not flexible enough to see that, you know what, if you erase this and extend that and maybe open this up a little bit, then it's going to change the whole thing. And that's the thing that I'm going for. What if we did that? And what if we had a little patience with ourselves as we did it? Impatience with the right things and a lot of patience with the things that we need to figure out along the way. But here's this thing, and this is the most important lesson that I think we all need to learn is that the good stuff in our lives, getting those things solidly put into place, like the beams, like the foundation, those things take time. Once a foundation is poured, it needs to cure. You know what that means? Just because it's hard doesn't mean that it's cured and it's safe to build upon. Think about that for a minute. What is your foundation? And what is it that needs time to just cure? That means that sometimes when we're setting ourselves up, maybe we just have a really simple, easy morning and evening ritual, right? When we're setting up. I call them the bookends of the day because if we have a good morning ritual, we feel good and confident to continue through the day. If we have a good evening ritual, we're ending the day well. This is why we use our journals. These journals are just fantastic and will help keep you focused and help keep you building and creating the kind of life that you want to live. So we have to look at this stuff. The good stuff and the foundational stuff takes a minute. We have to allow those things to cure, right? And that beam, that's got to go up. If that beam doesn't go up, you might be able to build it and get away with it for a minute. But if that beam isn't in place structurally, things are going to fall apart. The beams in our lives are making sure that it all fits in, And, I will tell you, one of the things that we need to be looking at is, what does the Bible tell us about being patient? Love is patient is the first thing from 1 Corinthians 13. It's the first thing that we're getting told that that's what love is. And I venture to say that we are a whole heck of a lot more patient with people in our lives than we are with ourselves. Is that not true? Pinkies up on that one, if that hit you. This is the first virtue, though, in love. And it's required is to be patient. What if you were impatient with your children all the time? And you just said to your little boy, get up, just start walking. For heaven's sakes, you're, 16 months old. It's time. You're not going to allow him to fall down and come back up again and kind of watch to make sure he doesn't bonk his head on the coffee table again? Are we so impatient that we don't allow for the learning curve? No, of course not. We're loving and we're watching carefully. What do we do with ourselves? We take ourselves and we just say, oh, that's it. You just can't do it, And we haven't even had a chance to learn how to toddle our way through the day. We haven't quite gotten there yet. Of course, we're not walking steadily. We've barely learned how to take the first step. Of course, we're not running. We're just taking the first step. What if we had patience with ourselves the way we have with a toddler who's just learning to walk? What if we did that? Love is patient. So we have to talk about self-control a little bit, don't we? How popular is that? How much do people like to talk about that? Because patience is an act of self-control. Being patient and kind, biting your tongue, and not saying something that you'll regret later. That's what it is. And then when we take that even further and apply that to ourselves, because you know what? Nobody hears the conversation that's in your head except you. And yet we live out all of this stuff when we're not careful about what we're saying to ourselves. I don't know about you, but I was really careful, mostly with what I said to my children, because I wanted them to grow up feeling loved, feeling cared about, and affirmed, right? I was careful. And then there were times that I wasn't, and I snapped and all of that. And then I had to apologize. The only thing that we can ever do, by the way, and this includes every single human that's in your life, is when you blow it, you go to that person and ask for forgiveness. Seek forgiveness. It's the only thing that we can do. You cannot take those words back. You can't go clean up the mess without first saying, you know what? I was a real jerk here, or I was really bad, or I was really, I was really lousy in my choice of words. I did not mean to be so cruel? And that includes your children. I don't care how old they are. That includes your children. Get down eyeball to eyeball and say, you know what? I would say third person, when my children were very little, mommy lost her temper and was just too loud and too harsh. Will you forgive me? It was such a cleansing moment, and it reset everything. What if we did that with ourselves? What if we did that with ourselves? I've been too harsh with you, Leanne. Now, I encourage people to look themselves in the eye and speak to themselves in the mirror, because when we do that, our brains are wired. That is, by the way, it's all in the book. I'm going to just get the book, The Carousel of Crazy. Find it at savingdata.com/crazy. The reason that I'm telling you this is this, and this is the important thing. Your name is your name, and your brain hears that above all, always. If you walked into a crowded room and somebody mentioned your name, you'd be looking around to say, although they could talk about spaghetti, they could talk about your sister, Anne, they could talk about all kinds of stuff. You're not going to hear that, but you will hear your name. So there's significance with your brain when you hear your name, and when you're looking in the mirror and you're speaking to yourself, you have a moment to love yourself up. I know it sounds crazy, but I do this all the time. I speak about this in the book. I've talked about this before here on the Daily Dish, and I mention it again because we run out of patience with ourselves as we're trying to build our own lives. We run out of patience. We give ourselves all kinds of latitude and rationalizations with all the excuses. That's where we should be impatient. But we don't give ourselves the patience of seeing what it's going to take in order to build the kind of life that we need to live, and the kind of construction that it should be for us, our own, original and custom. You're not a tract home. You are a custom creation, and you deserve that kind of attention on your life. And when you love yourself up, and when you give yourself a little loving kindness, that will help you to move into the next place. So here's the thing, is that when we allow for patience with what we're doing and making the definite delineation of saying, you know what, that didn't quite work, but you know what, let's try this time. We have those Edison moments. We always do. We always have Edison moments. But we allow for the progress then, and we allow for a new solution and a new idea and maybe a new way of doing things that are just right. Because you and I, we're all Goldilocks. Something could be too hard, something could be too soft, but that just right, you're the one who's going to determine that. It's like mattresses, really. It's literally like mattresses. Some people like a really firm mattress, some people like a soft one, some people like something just right in between. We get the right to do that. So patience can serve us well when we're doing this. You want to know how? I've got 9 things for you. You ready? Let's go. Number 1, it helps us to focus. When we're building our routines and our rituals, we call them rituals because they are that important. When we're building this into our lives, it helps us to see the goal, and it helps us to achieve them. Not necessarily easily, not necessarily boom, 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 just like that. It helps us to go through what we're doing, even with the discomfort, because we have a focus. We have a target in mind. We have an idea of what it is we want. How we want to build that life of ours. Number 2, it puts grit in our veins. You've heard me say this before. We've got grit, not quit. We don't need to be quitting on ourselves so much. This is how we overwhelm ourselves. We have everything is too big and too heavy and too hard to, list this long, all of that. And what does that do? It overwhelms us and paralyzes us. We can't do it. We can't do anything. So instead of doing that, we make it small. We get some satisfaction out of getting it done. And we notice that the grit factor is showing up so much more often than the quit factor. Amen? How about that? This is how we build a house, y'all. Number 3, we make better choices because we have goals. We have goals. We have a house in mind. It's on a blueprint. There's construction. There's people that we're going to, bringing in the experts to get this thing done. And those plans are going to help us out. And we're going to make good choices based on the fact that there's a goal in mind to getting this house done, right? We have patience with ourselves over the things that need to be fixed, and we have impatience over the things that we're putting off. Number 4, it gives opportunity for us to develop new skills. Now, listen, you might not be an expert painter, maybe in your house. I remember my first house, and I just learned how to paint. And my first house, there was no YouTube to teach me how to paint. But I'm going to tell you what, I asked that guy at the paint store, well, what do I do? Show me the brush that I need. How do I do this? And he was like rolling his eyes. And then he showed me. He showed me exactly what it is that I needed to do in order to make sure that I wasn't going to, waste the paint or spill the paint or have too much on my brush, have it all running down. And he told me a couple of things to keep in mind, and it made a difference. Because listen, when you start out renovating your house and doing things, and a lot of it you're doing on your own, you better, there's skills that you're going to have to bring along. Now we've got YouTube. I saw a woman who built her house with her kids by watching YouTube videos. She did it all. She had never done any kind of construction. That's how she did the foundation. That's how she did everything. Unbelievable. Somebody else who rebuilt an engine, never done it in their lives, rebuilt an engine watching YouTube videos. Mark fixed our refrigerator watching a YouTube video. There are things that we can do and skills we can get simply by watching a video and reading a tutorial. You ready to do that? This is an opportunity to develop new skills. Number 5, you feel better about yourself mentally when you take something on that might challenge you a little bit. And this is why patience is so important, because it's going to stretch and it's going to grow you. Look at Lynn. Lynn said she fixed her dryer. Hello. Long time ago, I fixed my, this is years ago when I was a single woman living alone. A plumber and an electrician could not fix my electric flip on the switch gas logs. I fixed them. YouTube video. So I just want to encourage everyone to think, when you think you can't, think again. Yes, you can. You just need a little help. Sometimes we need to call an expert, and sometimes that expert is on YouTube. 5, you feel better about yourself mentally. Boy, do you feel better about yourself. Didn't you feel good, Lynn, when you fixed your dryer? Didn't you feel good? Don't you feel good when you can do something? You say, yes, I can do that. I felt good. The first room I ever painted, it took me forever and a day, but I felt really good about that. I felt really good about being able to do something. Grouting. I grouted a whole kitchen, a kitchen tile in my first house. It needed regrouting. I did it. Figured it out. Talked to the guy and got the sponge, did the whole thing. We can do it. That feeling of accomplishment gives us a dopamine hit, and it helps to underscore and helps us to see, I can do hard things. And when you can do hard things, you can build a better house too, right? So number 6 is physically. It will impact you physically. Research shows that this is linked. That's because of the dopamine that I'm telling you about. It's so amazing. Do you remember, Patsy? I remember this. This is so funny. Do you remember the book? It was a book that I had when I had my first house. And it was a Reader's Digest How to Fix Anything book. It was yay thick. That's the book that I used for for those. I mean, I went through that book constantly. Yeah, but now we have YouTube. Lucy replaced an electric burner on her stove. That's awesome. Number 7, we become kinder and gentler. If we're patient with ourselves, we're going to be patient with others, and we're going to give each other a little latitude and a little grace. And does not the world need a little bit more of that right now? Right? In this place of building our houses, we have an opportunities to be really gentle and kind to ourselves. And I believe as we do this, we become stronger and we become more determined, and we don't quit. We have grit. And that kindness, that just spills over everything. If you can be kind to yourself, you can be kind to everyone. How about that for a change? Number 8, There's peace in the process. Have you noticed that? As you do, you start to get this peace. Even if you don't understand exactly what you're doing something. You've decided not to sit anymore. You've decided not to quit anymore. You get peace in the process of just putting it together. Even if it's just paper and pencil for right now, just do it. That little bit of doing is telling you, you know what? You've got it inside of you. And the peace that passes all understanding, well, it just shows up right there in the process. And number 9 is you become a better friend to others if you become a better friend to yourself. Think about that for a minute. You become a better listener, you're kinder, you're listening to yourself for the positives. And listen, it's a lot building a home, and it's a lot building a life too. The more kind that we can be with ourselves is the more kind that we can be with others. Because if we start with ourselves first, then we have so much more to give. We have nothing to give if we haven't been giving ourselves any love. You know, we have scraps. And how many times you've heard me say this? We sit at the table of the king. We're not little dogs on the floor waiting for a table scrap. We're sitting at the table. Royalty. It's now time to start acting like that. You know how to use a knife and fork. You know how to make polite conversation. Isn't it time you gave some of that to yourself? I say yes. I say yes and amen. That's what I say. I hope you enjoyed that today. That was quite a series that we had on being your own contractor. So enjoyed this time with you today. Peace be with you.
Thank you for joining me today. You can find me on TikTok for daily tips to help support your most vibrant life. And remember, you are the author of your own story. Until next time.